I want you guys to really lean in on this one. It's important. Watch all the way through, share this video, leave a comment, like it. We need this message out there. For a while now, we've been circling around this idea of where we situate the topic of religious trauma in the broader apologetics and counter-apologetics discussion. How do we give it a fair seat at the table alongside historical and textual criticism, scientific scrutiny, philosophical considerations, and the like? I've said before that religious trauma is a piece of the pie in the overall pie chart in terms of how we criticize Christianity in general. And thanks to Steven Bartlett's recent DOAC, which stands for Diary of a CEO, if you're not familiar with one of the most popular podcasts out there, DOAC's video titled Atheist versus Christian versus Spiritual Thinker is not believing in God causing more harm than good. I think we have found firmer ground on how and where religious trauma fits into this broader discussion. I've said before that I believe it's a critical missing element, a very powerful element in this discussion. But together, we can elevate its status and relevance in this broader discussion, and that's what we're going to do here today. If you haven't seen the more than 3-hour DOAC video, it's worth a watch. Plenty to mine from that video and respond to. We'll respond to several clips today. Paulogia recently responded to it also, so we'll move between clips of the original video and Paulogia's video in our response today. I'll try to keep this one under an hour, but man, we could spend days with this content. We're also going to touch on Pargament's theory in this one, and if you're not familiar with that as it relates to religious coping and religious trauma, we'll unwind that a bit. Hey friends, I'm H.G.Roberts, deconverted Christian after 25 years and author of On Monsters and Phantoms. And here on this channel, we talk about religious trauma and how the Bible itself ties us up in knots. It leads to confusion, anxiety, fear, doubt, depression, emotional oblivion, mental paralysis, and ultimately, of course, trauma. I have a master's degree in mass communication, so I'm specifically interested in the messages that the Bible communicates to us today, the cognitive filters in our minds that we use to interpret those messages, and finally, the harmful impact those messages have on ourself and our worldview. For today, I'm mostly pulling clips from DOAC's and Paulogia's videos around apologist Greg Koukl's take on the Christian life being a positive and rewarding one full of God-given purpose and meaning. We'll spend most of our time camping out on those issues. And here's our first clip.
Is that evidential that all 5 religions are true?
Well, see, I don't actually think it works that way. You can speculate and say and offer that illustration, but I don't think it actually works that way. I think that universally the experience of Christians is very, very quantifiable
So in
terms
scenario,
of transformed lives, and this is one of the reasons that these transformed lives lend credibility to the belief system itself.
So in that scenario where one of my friends turns to Islam, one of my friends turns to Christianity, etc., the only experience that's evidential of truth is the Christians.
Well, I think you have to look at every individual thing, all right? And here's my suspicion, and I haven't quantified this across the board, all right? Different people have different experiences by engaging different religious belief traditions, whatever. But insofar as anybody's life is significantly altered by that thing, this to me is evidence that something is going on here than merely the belief. If it's just the belief, you're back to Marx again and the opiate of the people.
First, I want you to notice that what you just heard is Koukl's suspicion, informed only by some cherry-picked anecdotes that confirm his bias toward Christianity being a favorable option for living a positive life. And by saying that, he's already admitted to overlooking the scores of research and data, both empirically validated and anecdotally documented, that tell the opposite story. Christianity has a negative or harmful effect on someone's life for reasons that we document here on this channel. Koukl likes to assert that if someone's life is significantly positively altered by belief, then that can and should count as evidence not just for its positive benefits, but its truth. Okay, And this is why we need to start having religious trauma experts at tables such as these. How about the scores of documented cases proving that through severe religious trauma, Christianity significantly damages lives? Does that count as evidence toward the truth of Christianity being harmful or also fraudulent or bereft of power? Well, let me correct myself. It actually has real power to do real harm. What would Kokel do with that evidence? Dismiss it, discount it, ignore it, claim the harm isn't real and that it's rooted in the individual who is suffering the trauma? Would he say that for a woman who has been beaten and traumatized by her husband, that this woman is somehow in the wrong for feeling that way because she's an error for not seeing her husband as a source of love, kindness, and compassion because he, takes her out to dinner sometimes in between when he beats and berates her? When you read in between the love passages of the Bible, you'll find endorsements for slavery, genocide, misogyny, rape as punishment, God giving people wasting diseases, hardening hearts, creating people to be vessels meant for destruction, unforgivable sin, and on and on. Greg, if you want positive subjective experience to count as evidence for a thing, there are mountains of negative subjective experience that should count as incriminating evidence against it. You can't have your cake and eat it too. In legal terms, we call this spoliation, which is the intentional, reckless, or negligent withholding, hiding, altering, fabricating, or destroying of evidence that is relevant to a legal proceeding. You can't make a unilateral claim that Christianity only benefits people while ignoring the evidence that demonstrates its harm. I think you know this, though, Greg. You've been around the block a bit. Certainly you're familiar with religious trauma and the millions who suffer from it. If not, pull up a chair and lean in. Your apologetic dishonesty is now exposed.
This is what I was getting back at a little bit ago when I talked about the person whose life has been changed by becoming a Christian. And these aren't just what you explained to your friend. These are not things that just happen here and there, but there seems to be a very, very broad experience of this. And a change that doesn't depend on circumstances, okay? It's because they adopt a understanding of the world that I think is an accurate understanding, and this is why their emotions and their experience follows along, because they're choosing an accurate understanding of the world. When you look at Jesus in the Gospels, I think it's so interesting to me that people read the Gospels to be uplifted by the reading of it. It seems that misses the point that Jesus is talking about the way the world is. He's teaching about the nature of reality. He was a Torah-observant Jew. He wasn't a Hindu. He wasn't a Buddhist. He was a Jew. And he spoke in the context of that. Okay. So just to simply read the Gospels as if we're going to read some nice things that people said to make me feel better is missing Jesus' point when he's trying to describe the nature of reality.
I don't think that's how the gospel should be read, but I do think,
1 second. I have a question for you on that. This is a personal question more than anything. So I find myself in the same position as Alex, where I think I'd be happier, all things considered, if I had an anchoring in a religion. I think that's like a subjectively true, that I'd be happier. Mm-hmm. Probably just because it would close a gap of some sort. It would anchor me in some way.
Answer a question.
It would answer a question, and then it would give me more of a structure to my decision making. And, it would mean that when I have moments of suffering, I'd have a solution to that moment of suffering. Mm-hmm. So if my parents end up dying someday, which I'm sure they will, I will believe that they are still alive and they are somewhere and they're fine, which will ease my suffering. So I agree with Alex in that regard. The problem I have is in order to adopt that view, I need to believe it. It's true. People aren't very good at lying to themselves. And also when you talk about my friend in Dubai has had this experience, he now feels better. He could have well felt better, I believe, if he had, believed that Islam was true and become a Muslim. So it's the feeling itself people can get in a lot of ways. I know people that actually would tell you that they feel better now that they're out of the cult and they're agnostic.
Yeah, sure.
And the cult made them feel terrible. Now they're agnostic, they feel better. Does that mean agnosticism is truth?
So the presumption that you made is a presumption. We have to keep that in mind. I mean, the people that I have talked to who were former Muslims and are now Christians, very devout Muslims, they did not have the experience of satisfaction, fullness, and connection with God in Islam that they do in Christianity. Okay,
There's
so we
presumably
want to be
people-
careful that we
You know
don't
there are
just
people who do the opposite,
stipulate.
though.
Yeah, there's people that would have gone the other way, and they'll be in the comment section right now saying, well, I went from Christianity to Islam.
Okay, well, sure. I'm just telling you what I know of those people, okay?
My goodness, apologists have to apologize for what they say because it's so often in error. Immediately, Steven and Alex call out Kokol for a ridiculous statement that a handful of Muslims he's spoken to didn't have the same connective and uplifting experience in Islam as they did when they converted to Christianity. The problem is this. Kokol's argument boils down to a subjective feeling and experience with a belief system. At the end of the day, that's all any apologist has, subjective feelings and experience. And when those things affirm their position and belief, Christianity works and is true, and apologists shout those stories from the rooftops. But when it doesn't work, or worse, when it actually damages people, those stories are discounted and dismissed, left on the cutting room floor. In other words, in the minds of apologists, negative results can never prove Christianity harmful or false. This is textbook confirmation bias, publication bias, and the file drawer effect at work, as blatant as it can be. If you're not familiar, the file drawer effect, similar to publication bias, is the tendency for researchers, or in Kokol's case, apologists, to publish or share studies with positive results while shelving studies with negative results in a metaphorical file drawer. It's also treating negative results as statistically insignificant. This selective reporting creates a skewed and incomplete picture of the issue because the findings overrepresent successful studies. Look, I've certainly had horrendous, horrific, and harmful experiences with Christianity, well documented in this book and my videos, as have many of you. And we've documented those things here on this channel. We cite chapter and verse. Kokol, contend with these experiences too. Contend with these stories. Have the courage to engage the full picture. Have the courage to actually listen. I know it severely damages your case and position, but at least you're being honest. Doesn't your God value honesty? We could actually answer that either way biblically, but you get my point. I've made it easy for you by creating a growing bibliography on my site that captures the research around religious trauma. I'm going breathless asking apologists to actually engage religious trauma. And for all you counter-apologists, look, it's fine to engage the philosophical, social, and scientific arguments as was done here in the DOAC video, but I'm over here going, there's a mountain of evidence for religious trauma that would completely eviscerate Kokol's claims and arguments. Get familiar with this message so you have it in your arsenal. And to be fair, Alex and Steven sort of tiptoe into that area, sort of, but man, missed opportunity. And again, to be fair, likely neither Alex nor Steven have dealt with severe religious trauma the way I and many of you have, so their vocabulary on these issues isn't quite that sharp and mature. That's okay. That's why my channel is here, to help. But I beg you guys to start bringing into these discussions religious trauma experts. It's such a missing piece, and we're so close to putting it all together. So let's stay on this theme of Christianity creating only positive change in someone's life. And here's a clip from Paulogia's video.
Any place where you have a significant change in life, experiential impact of following what you think is true, well, that's evidence.
That
for
counts.
It. But it's not the whole story.
Sure.
Because you have contradictory experience. I should say you have experiences that seem to support contradictory views.
Sure.
Now, Steven says, is it evidential that all 5 religions of his friends are true? And the answer to that is yes. Of course, it's evidential. Each one provides some evidence that increases the probability of its truth compared to what it would have been in the absence of such experience. According to probability theory, an item of information, call it E, is evidence for a hypothesis just in case that hypothesis is more probable given the evidence E than it would have been without it. And if you have a changed life, that does make your hypothesis more probable than it would have been if your life were not changed, if everything just went on as before. So I certainly do think that the evidence of a changed life does count toward the truth of the belief system.
Suppose there was a trial accusing Sally of theft, and the prosecution was able to establish that Sally likes money, and subsequently argues that Sally liking money is evidence that she stole the money. The defense then calls to the stand an array of citizens: Billy, Jamal, Omar, Ravi, Diego. Each of them also admits to liking money, but still, the prosecution insists that Sally is their girl because she likes money. The defense then calls to the stand Patrick, who thinks money is evil and openly dislikes everything about money. And yet, he was last to be seen in the vicinity of the money. And he recently paid off a large debt despite a lack of income, because he hates money. But the prosecution insists that any true thief must first love money. So Patrick is ruled out as a suspect. Would any jury convict Sally under such circumstances? I would hope not.
Non-piece of, I don't know if I'd say it's strictly evidential, but it's a part of a larger case that we have for Christianity that we objectively flourish, not just subjectively.
It's not even a relevant part of a cumulative case. A changed life is potential evidence for a worldview only against worldviews without changed lives. For any other worldviews with changed lives, it's a wash. And I'm unaware of any major worldview that doesn't have examples of changed lives. On top of that, you'd also need to demonstrate that the true worldview must necessarily result in positive changed lives. They already acknowledge that some worldviews could be both true and depressing. So this is a double failure.
Paulogia does a great job hammering home the point that other worldviews can also create positive change. So Christians should not discount those in order to bolster Christianity's claim that the best changed life can only come from Christianity. But again, let's look at the evidence that proves, not suggests, but proves that Christianity harms people to the point of needing psychological therapy, care, and intervention. And if Kokel, William Lane Craig, and others want to assert that's because the traumatized person hasn't been truly regenerated by the Holy Spirit and is thus living in darkness, and it's the demons in that darkness wreaking havoc on the mind of the traumatized, we did this video here called Christians, You're Telling on Yourselves, that addresses that bag of nonsense. I won't recap that video here. You can go watch it, and you should. But at the very best, that warped line of thinking gets you to Calvinism, where God predestines or chooses who he will save and who he won't, even if those he won't ask to be saved, which opens a major can of thorny problems Christians cannot reconcile. All apologetic roads lead to dead ends when you actually think them out. I can hear some of you Christians accusing me of the same thing I'm accusing Kokel of, just in the reverse. I'm only focusing on the negative side of Christianity while neglecting the positive aspects of it. While my channel and message do focus primarily on the negative aspects of Christianity, I am on the record repeatedly saying that Christianity can and does provide benefits to some. The research supports that side as well. Some people do in fact have positive experiences with Christianity. It works for them. They're not traumatized by it. Not every combat veteran suffers from PTSD, just like not every Christian is traumatized by Christianity. My own wife still embraces and benefits from Christianity. I see it firsthand every single day. So again, I acknowledge that it benefits some. I acknowledge that it has left some positive marks on humanity. Now, apologists, are you ready to be honest and admit that it truly damages and traumatizes some? And are you ready to learn how and why? Are you ready to face the music and stop hiding from the truth, from reality? All I've ever asked for is not to abolish Christianity, but to say it should come with a warning label that may traumatize some, so it should be practiced at your own risk. And by the way, all the videos I'm referencing, I'll put links to in the description.
If Greg accepts only Christian positives and ignores all Christian negatives, while at the same time ignoring every durable, transformative, non-Christian experience, it's not surprising that he's left with only positives. We call this confirmation bias.
What I'm saying here is you can always point to individual lives that are changed by kind of a religious endeavor, but there's something absolutely unique across the board about the Christian experience. And again, that sounds self-serving, but this is quantifiable. And I think this is what was happening with the friend in Dubai, Stephen's friend in Dubai.
There's something absolutely unique and quantifiable about Christian experiences, but the only way to quantify it is vibes. And no non-Christian experiences have these vibes for some reason. And only the really true, really real Christians can sense the vibes.
Paulogia gets it absolutely right in that Venn diagram, and here's where a religious trauma expert could elaborate on those negative Christian experiences. It's great that Paulogia acknowledges them. I'm so glad that he did. Now, let's turn into that skid and elaborate on what they are, how they happen, and to whom they happen. And that's what we do here on this channel. We know what they are. There's a definition in the literature. Religious trauma results from an event, series of events, relationships, or circumstances within or connected to religious beliefs, practices, or structures that is experienced by an individual as overwhelming or disruptive and has lasting adverse effects on a person's physical, mental, social, emotional, or spiritual well-being. And we are zeroing in on how they happen and to whom they are most likely to happen. Life experiences matter. Temperament matters. Personality matters. So, how can we get apologists to start contending with this? We keep our foot on the gas and keep repeating it until it's a natural part of the conversation. So before we shift into some clips where Kokel talks about God giving us purpose and meaning, I want to add to this discussion on positive and negative Christian experiences a quick overview of Pargament's theory on religious coping. If you're not familiar with Pargament's theory, the central idea is that religion is a psychological resource that people use to find meaning, control, comfort, and connection in the face of stress or crisis. Kenneth Pargament, one of the most influential psychologists in the field of the psychology of religion and spirituality, calls this process religious coping. There's positive religious coping, and there's negative religious coping. Religion, specifically Christianity, can either help or it can harm. Pargament's The Psychology of Religion and Coping links religion and mental health, obviously something we're very interested in on this channel. Pargament's theory says that religious belief systems can either facilitate resilience and healing or exacerbate distress and dysfunction, depending on how those beliefs are integrated and practiced. He says that religious coping involves interpreting or managing stress through sacred meaning systems, or ways we make meaning of our lives through the sacred. Examples include prayer, ritual, surrender to divine will, or seeking guidance from spiritual communities. These practices can alleviate stress, provide existential coherence, or what I would call divine resonance, and foster emotional resilience. They can lift us up when we're down. However, when religious beliefs or institutions promote fear, shame, worthlessness, or learned helplessness, all things Christianity is famous for, they may hinder coping and contribute to long-lasting psychological harm. Positive religious coping involves adaptive strategies that affirm connection and trust and growth with God. Examples include collaborative problem solving with God by following certain biblical prescriptions, getting spiritual support from others within your community, and reframing suffering as an opportunity for transformation. We're told to be grateful for our suffering, that it produces perseverance. Individuals using positive coping often report greater well-being, lower stress levels, and stronger feelings of hope and purpose. And no surprise there. But on the flip side, the side apologists and pastors will never tell you, negative religious coping, sometimes called spiritual struggle, happens when religious beliefs become sources of guilt, alienation, confusion, cognitive dissonance, or fear. Examples include feeling punished or abandoned by God, perceiving suffering as divine retribution or demonic attack, or experiencing conflict with religious communities, perhaps because you're asking questions or doubting. Pargament's research shows that negative coping correlates with poorer mental health outcomes, including anxiety, depression, and post-traumatic stress symptoms. all of which can lead to what we know as religious trauma. Getting a bit more specific, Pargament's model of spiritual struggles includes divine struggles, which feeling abandoned, punished, or betrayed by God; demonic struggles, attributing suffering to evil or demonic forces, like we just said a second ago; interpersonal struggles, conflict with clergy, family, or fellow believers; moral struggles, guilt or shame related to perceived sin or failure; ultimate meaning struggles, loss of purpose or existential doubt; and then doubt struggles, uncertainty about beliefs or doctrines. Sound familiar? Each of these struggles reflects a disruption in a person's sacred meaning system, the framework through which they understand reality, morality, and self-worth. When that system is threatened or destroyed through Bible verses and stories that we cover on this channel, the results can be profoundly destabilizing. Pargament describes this as sacred loss or desecration, where something previously experienced as holy and beneficial, like God or prayer or community, becomes contaminated by fear, shame, or betrayal and is now harmful. Remember, the religiously traumatized were all one-time devout Christians. No non-Christian suffers from religious trauma. This is why religious trauma is uniquely painful. It is not merely the, loss of belief, but the violation of what was once sacred. When the sacred itself becomes a source of fear or abuse, recovery requires not only emotional healing, but a total reconstruction of meaning, a rebuilding of one's capacity to relate to the sacred or to life itself without terror. After this collapse happens, it's often through the help and guidance from a therapist that we must redefine our sacred meaning systems in ways that promote autonomy or agency, compassion, and self-worth, because these are the things we've lost. For survivors of religious trauma, this process may involve reclaiming spirituality outside religion or traditional doctrine, or developing secular frameworks for meaning and moral grounding, which gets to Pargament's broader emphasis on rebuilding significance, which is the psychological capacity to find coherence and purpose after a crisis. Notice what doesn't work in this context: using the Bible to fix the crisis. This is why I always say you can't use the problem to fix the problem. It only exacerbates the problem. For the religiously traumatized, the absolute worst thing you can do is throw scriptures at them, thinking they'll help or convict. So, that's a very quick walkthrough of Pargament's theory on religious coping, but it again underscores the research about how religion, namely Christianity, can harm, while at the same time demonstrating how it can help. And if you track Pargament's research in the literature, lots of other scholars have expanded on his work. And as we make more videos, we'll touch on more and more of that research. So to cap this discussion, my argument has always been that a perfect, omnibenevolent God who can apparently fine-tune a universe to support and sustain life failed to fine-tune his own word such that it would create only positive coping and wouldn't and couldn't so easily lead many down a dangerous path, one of negative religious coping. Religious trauma is never the fault of the traumatized. The fault lies in the source religious experiences and the source religious material, and how those experiences and material intersect and integrate with unique human beings with predispositions built from their own life experiences, sometimes traumatic ones. To lay the blame of religious trauma on the traumatized is not only ignorant, but wrong and dangerous, and it could very well disrupt someone's ability to receive appropriate trauma-informed care and heal. Okay, we're going to shift gears a bit and respond to some clips where Kolkel asserts that God gives us purpose and meaning, and then we'll close out.
Let me just bring it back down to some of the popular questions we had from our audience. One of the most popular questions we had is, do we each have a specific purpose, or is it self-chosen, Greg?
Well, in my view, if God has made us for a reason, and he wants us to be in relationship with us, each individual person has different capabilities, and fulfilling those capabilities that God has given him, general ones and specific ones, like I have my own peculiar capabilities, doing that is going to make me satisfied, okay?
So did God give me a purpose?
Yes.
And is it different from Alex's purpose?
I would say In the kind of the minutia, yes, you're a different individual than he is.
And can I ask you a question that then springs to mind?
Yeah.
Again, I'm very curious. If Steven Bartlett had gotten cancer at 1 year old and I died,
I see. Yeah. Well, then you wouldn't be fulfilling the particulars that God had intended for you. But that kind of thing happens because we live in a broken world. It isn't the perfect world. It is not the good. It's not the totally good world that God made. Something happened that broke the world.
We'll start with Kokel's claim of each person has God-given unique capabilities. And that sounds lovely, right? We all want to believe that. It demonstrates a real God invested and engaged intentionally with the people he's created. The Bible talks about unique spiritual gifts and even vocational abilities. Each member of the body serves a unique purpose. Okay, fine. It's well documented on this channel that I believed from my youth that God gave me a love for and ability to play music so that I could worship him and bring the gospel to the world through music. But what happens when this same God either gives you or allows you to be afflicted with a neuromuscular disease that specifically atrophies hand and arm muscles as well as leg and feet muscles, such that you can no longer play the very instrument that you once believed God called you to play for his glory? And you believe and can back up through Scripture that God gave you this disease and stripped you of your ability to play as a punishment for your sin. Either a past porn addiction you prayed daily for God to remove from you, but his grace is sufficient to leave that demon inside you, right? And his power is perfected in your weakness, and all that temptation he allows to assault you night and day when you beg for a moment's relief. But Scripture tells you it's God who's keeping the pedal down on your temptation to test you constantly, and you believe that God is punishing you with a wasting disease like he did for his chosen Israelites in Deuteronomy when they sinned, because you feared that you elevated your love for music above your love for God, which the Bible defines as idol worship, and we know how God feels about idol worship and what he does to those who worship and elevate idols. It's not pretty. See how easily this spirals? Wasting diseases is one of God's selective punishments, by the way. What happens then, Greg, when God strips you of your God-given abilities because his wrath always wins against your disobedience? Well, that creates a life of confusion, of dissonance, of sadness, of frustration or fear, of trauma, especially for the sexually abused, melancholic, empathic thinker prone to OCD scrupulosity via excessive rumination and negative religious coping. All stuff we talk about and normalize here. Kokel also asserts that humans broke the perfect world God created and intended. Look, apologists, stop using intended. This word gets you in all kinds of trouble. I'm tired of rehashing this same rebuttal, but humans are not omnipotent and cannot break a world. Only God can break the perfect thing he created, and it was his choice to break the world through cursing it versus correcting it from the start. Humans didn't curse it. Satan didn't curse it. God did. God perpetuates our sinful nature. It wasn't man's idea to have Adam and Eve's sin manifest through the rest of humanity after them. It was the perfectly loving and moral God's idea. I won't belabor that point here, but damn, am I tired of repeating it. How apologists still have this argument in their arsenal is beyond me. The other thing is, how could something God originally intended wind up as something that departs from what he intended? Unless God himself is the one who shifts and changes things. If you want a sovereign and omnipotent God, the world is not in disarray because of man. It's because God has allowed it to be and persist in this disarrayed and fallen state, which was his idea. If you want a sovereign and omnipotent God, it is not possible to live in any world for even 1 second that isn't God's intention, his design. So this current fallen world we live in is God's intention, his design, his responsibility. I don't care that Christians claim that one day he'll fix it and restore it to how he originally intended. A maximally great and loving entity could not allow his creation to dip into chaos and attain a fallen state unless he himself cursed it, which is not a maximally great thing to do. A sovereign, omnipotent God's intentions are never thwarted unless he himself thwarts them. And I've got one more clip for you guys.
I'm pretty confident that the explanation that I'm giving resonates with our deep intuitions about the nature of reality. It's straightforward. It's simple. You were made for great things. We know this, made for God, and we're not there. We know this intuitively. It just makes sense. It resonates with the deepest intuitions that we have about the nature of the world and what it means to be human.
Perhaps Kokel has forgotten about Romans 9:18-21. Therefore God has mercy on whom he wants to have mercy, and he hardens whom he wants to harden. One of you will say to me, then why does God still blame us? For who is able to resist his will? Meaning it's God's will to blind, delude, confuse, and harden some of us, and we can't resist, prevent, or change that. But who are you, a human being, to talk back to God? Shall what is formed say to the one who formed it, why did you make me like this? Does not the potter have the right to make out of the same lump of clay some pottery for special purposes and some for dishonorable use? I don't think there's any more of an incriminating verse against God in the Bible. I mean, was Judas meant for great things? And here's a list, not comprehensive, of all the people groups this same God who loves and cares about people and fills them with purpose and meaning either slaughtered himself or commanded the Israelites to slaughter. Here's the thing. Religious trauma can take hold of someone when they read all those scriptures we just cited that Christians like to say demonstrate God's righteous justice, but, and I've said this before, it's not really the main point. The problem is how excessively brutal, savage, barbaric, and inconsistent God is in exacting what amounts to his vengeance. Well, he's perfectly just and consistent, H.G. No, he saves Paul, turns Paul into the father of Christianity. This is a guy who's equally, if not more deserving of God's wrath and punishment than any of those people groups who did not know the law, who were not chosen by God. Lest we forget, throughout both the Old and New Testaments, God declares that Israel and its people will be judged more severely than Gentile nations when they sin because they knew better. Their covenant relationship brought both special favor and special accountability. Jesus makes this clear in Luke 12:47-48 when he says, that servant who knew his master's will but did not get ready or act according to his will receive a severe beating. But the one who did not know and did what deserved a beating will receive a light beating. Thanks. Everyone to whom much was given, of him much will be required. Jews who had the law are more accountable than Gentiles who did not, a theme Paul later develops in Romans chapter 2. And this is the same Paul who, as a Hebrew leader, received not just a lighter sentence for his crimes, killing Christians, but was vaulted and elevated to, arguably the co-founder of Christianity. Not only is God not consistent, but he doesn't hold himself to the standard he sets. He did far worse to non-chosen people groups than he did to Israelites. Yes, they were punished too, but others had it worse. That's God not following through with what he actually says. Okay, guys, that's all I've got for you today. I hope this was helpful. As I said, please help this one get some real traction so we can establish our seat at the table and make sure that religious trauma starts becoming a solid argument at these round tables that criticize Christianity. If nothing else, I hope I've given you the arguments and the points you can make in your own conversations. Thanks for being here, everyone. If you want to support this channel, please like, subscribe, share, comment, and don't forget to turn on notifications so you don't miss my next conversation starter. But a way to support the channel financially, since I don't have Patreons or sponsors, is to do what many others have done and purchase On Monsters and Phantoms. It's my memoir about severe religious trauma and deconversion from Christianity, and leave a review. It's a raw and honest look into the diabolically harmful mind games Christianity plays with us, and the link to it on Amazon is below. I appreciate that. If you do buy it, let me know via email in addition to a comment so I can publicly thank you in my next video. And by the way, if you're on the fence about whether or not to read my memoir, head over to onmonstersandphantoms.com. Right there on the homepage are lots of reader reviews. This isn't an easy read, but hopefully others can help you know what to expect and how it can help. Look for new videos each Wednesday and Sunday morning at 7 a.m. Eastern Time, where we take a deep dive into what religious trauma is, how it forms, in whom it's most likely to form, and what we can do about it if it does form. If you'd like me to cover a specific topic, let me know in the comments. And if you're new here and curious about religious trauma or think you may be suffering from it, first of all, welcome to the channel and explore it to see what other topics I've covered and what resources are available to you. And until next time, let's continue to catalyze a conversation together about religious trauma to let those who suffer from it know that there's hope, and to let those who dismiss it know that it's real.